In a small cobbled village that lay beneath the watchful towers of a grand castle where banners fluttered in the morning breeze and bells of the chapel rang gently, there lived a rat who was not an ordinary rat, for he believed he was destined for greatness, and he strutted about with a tiny feather stuck in his fur as if it were the proud plume of a knight, and he called himself Sir Ratty, though no sword had ever touched his shoulder to grant him such a title, and he longed to be known. Not for hiding under tables to steal crumbs, nor for scurrying in dungeons to nibble old crusts, but for something noble and grand, and after much dreaming he decided that his destiny was to run a shop, and not just any shop but a cheese shop, for in the market he had seen golden wheels shining like treasure and smelled the sweet buttery scent that drifted like magic through the stalls, and he thought to himself, yes, this is the way to glory and honor and riches, and perhaps even the king himself will know my name as Sir Ratty, the cheese merchant of the realm. With this idea burning bright, he gathered every coin he had ever found from fallen purses or forgotten corners, and he rented a stall in the market square, though it was crooked and old, with beams bent like weary guards and a roof patched with straw and moss. It was his kingdom, and he painted a wooden sign with shaky letters that proudly read Sir Ratty's Royal Cheese Shop, and on the first morning of business he stood tall behind the counter with a piece of cloth draped over his shoulders like a nobleman's cape, and he stacked the cheeses he had gathered into a grand pyramid, though it leaned dangerously to one side, and he gazed at it with pride as if it were a monument in his honor. When the villagers passed by they smiled and chuckled, for it was not every day they saw a rat running a stall, and they came to see his cheeses and sniffed the air and found the smell most delightful, for Rat had collected cheddar and brie and gouda and even a bit of blue cheese that he declared had been aged in the deepest dungeon where ghosts of knights once roamed, and people were curious and some even dropped a coin for a slice. But there was a problem, for Sir Ratty was not only a merchant, he was also the greediest little customer of his own shop, and though he told himself again and again, I must not nibble, I must not taste, he could not resist, and soon he was sampling a corner of cheddar to be sure it was good, and then another corner of brie to be certain it was soft and creamy, and then a wedge of gouda to see if it was golden enough, and before long his paws were greasy, his whiskers were dusted with crumbs, and the proud pyramid of cheese looked more like a toppled wall after a siege. By noon his belly was round and his counter was bare, and when a villager asked him, Sir Ratty, where is all the stock, he puffed his chest and said boldly, I have guarded it most bravely from thieves and monsters, and therefore it is safe within me. And though the villager laughed kindly, they walked away without buying, for there was nothing left to buy, and this became the way of his shop. Every morning he promised himself he would be strong and noble, and every afternoon he was defeated by his own greedy teeth, and he tried to cover it up by turning a wedge around or hiding half-eaten wheels behind the counter. Yet the villagers were no fools, and they began to call his shop Sir Ratty's vanishing cheese stall. Still Ratty was proud and stubborn, and one day a knight passed through the market with armor that shone like the morning sun, and the knight bent down to peer at the little rat and asked, what makes your cheese so fine, little merchant? And Ratty without thinking said, because I test every piece personally. And the knight laughed so loudly that his helmet nearly toppled, and he bought nothing, but he told the tale in the tavern that night, and soon people were laughing about the rat who ate his own wares. Yet Ratty was not discouraged, he began to dream even bigger. He imagined his cheeses served in the grand halls of the castle at feasts where banners hung high and torches glowed upon stone walls, and lords and ladies sat in silks and jewels, and he thought to himself, yes, I must supply the king himself, and then I will be the most famous merchant in the land. And so with great excitement he wrote upon a scrap of parchment in the wobbly scrawl of his paw a request to present his cheese at the royal feast, and he carried it to the castle gates puffing out his chest as if he were a knight himself, and demanded an audience with the king. The guards at the gate laughed so heartily that their armor rattled, but they found him amusing and let him through the great courtyard where banners waved high and fountains sparkled in the sunlight, and Ratty strutted across the cobbles as though he were already a nobleman returning from victory. And when he entered the castle halls he was nearly overwhelmed by the sight of golden chandeliers and long tables lined with silver plates and goblets, but he reminded himself, I am Sir Ratty the cheese merchant, and I must be brave. And when the king himself entered in robes of crimson trimmed with fur, Ratty bowed so low his nose brushed the cold stone floor, and he presented his basket, which was meant to hold 10 wheels of cheese. Yet when the king looked inside he saw only crumbs and scraps and perhaps the faintest scent of cheddar, and he raised an eyebrow and asked, where is the cheese, little merchant? And Ratty stammered and tapped his round belly and whispered humbly, within me, Your Majesty. The court erupted with laughter so loud it shook the stained glass windows. The lords and ladies clapped their hands, the knights banged their goblets on the tables, and even the queen giggled behind her jeweled fan. And Ratty, though embarrassed, felt strangely proud, for he had made the entire royal court laugh. And the king, after wiping his eyes from laughter, declared, Little rat, you are far too greedy to be a merchant, but you are amusing enough to be our jester. And so instead of selling cheese, Ratty was invited to stay in the castle and tell silly tales and dance upon the long tables during feasts while the guests cheered and clapped. And though he never earned riches from cheese, he found riches in the joy of making others smile. Back in the village his crooked little stall remained empty, for without Ratty no one tended it, and the children of the town decided to change his sign from Sir Ratty's Royal Cheese Shop to Sir Ratty's Empty Belly Shop, and rather than Frown Ratty laughed with them when he visited, for he had come to realize that being laughed at was not such a bad fate when laughter brought warmth and cheer to the people, and he told the children stories of his adventures in the castle and how he once stood before the king with nothing but crumbs, and how he had eaten a wheel of brie so large he rolled down the market street like a barrel, and the children squealed with delight and begged for more. At royal banquets he became a favorite, for the nobles would pile cheeses high on silver platters just to see if he could resist, and of course he never could, and the sight of the little rat stuffing his cheeks while proclaiming that he was merely testing the quality became the highlight of many feasts, and the musicians would strike up playful tunes while Ratty danced with a wedge of cheddar in one paw and a goblet of milk in the other, and the hall would echo with laughter late into the night, and Ratty began to think, perhaps this is even better than being a merchant, for I am important in my own silly way. As the seasons passed his fame spread beyond the castle walls, and travelers would stop at the market hoping to glimpse the little rat who once tried to run a cheese shop but ate all his stock, and ballad singers even composed songs about him with verses like "Beware the merchant who cannot resist his wares," and though Ratty knew these were jokes he puffed out his chest and took a bow whenever he heard them, for he liked the sound of his name carried by music across the land, and he always told himself, "Yes, I have achieved greatness, though perhaps not in the way I first imagined." And so Sir Ratty, the would-be merchant who dreamed of importance but could never resist a nibble, found happiness not in gold or goods but in laughter and companionship, and though his belly was always round and his whiskers often dusted with crumbs, he was content, for the people loved him not for his shop nor for his promises but for his foolishness and his cheer, and whenever someone asked what happened to the famous cheese shop he would smile and say with a twinkle in his eye, "I ate it, of course," and everyone laughed, and the halls and streets filled once more with the gentle sound of joy until the stars shone above the castle towers and the village settled into sleep, and thus the little rat lived merrily ever after, always dreaming, always nibbling, always laughing.